under our eyes, or nose. What's your nose, Ross? You've got a long one. I got a note recently from a bloke called Troy Stratti, who's the owner of a company called Barangaroo Sandstone. And they did all the beautiful rock work that you see around Barangaroo. If you've been to Barangaroo, that is amazing. Well done, Paul Keating, because that was his idea, but amazing stuff. Now, Troy wanted to tell me about another project he's involved in right on our doorstep here at Pyrmont. It's the excavation of a rare type of sandstone, yellow block, 20,000 tonnes of it, and that will be used for the restoration of heritage buildings like the Australian Museum and the Sydney Hospital, and the yellow block stockpile has fallen to critically low levels, to the point where there's pretty much none left. So in talking to Troy off-air, we discovered some of the history of this entire area. Saunders Street, now that's where we are. We're in Saunders Street out the front. Is named after the Saunders family, who owned and ran the quarries of Sydney for 3 generations in the 1800s. In fact, the family lived right in the middle of the quarry. And Quarry Master Drive, which is just around the corner from where we're broadcasting now, takes its name from the quarry masters, who were highly regarded for their ability to remove the stone. And I said to Paul, this is a story. So he's over here. I told this bloke he's a star, Ron Powell. Ron's an architect, a landscape architect, and a stone consultant to the New South Wales government. He was responsible for landscaping Darling Harbour and the Chinese Gardens, and worked on the Opera House to finish the project after Jornutsen left. He's only a young bloke. This is an amazing story, hey?
It's a fantastic story, Alan.
Isn't it? Unfortunately, it's radio and not TV, but the pictures... Now, Ross, look at this. This is what... How far down have you gone?
We've gone about 6 metres, 20 feet.
Right.
And we're going another 2 benches. We call stone benches, 1.5 metres deep. That's how big the blocks are.
How big are the blocks? Go that again.
Yeah, they're about 2.5 metres long, 1.5 metres deep, 1.5 metres wide, about 4 tonnes each.
And this is right on the edge of Blackwattle Bay.
It's the quarry started at Blackwattle Bay and worked all the way to the end of the Pyrmont Peninsula in the 1800s.
So people walk around and come today and walk around Quarry Master Drive. They can they'll see the cutting where they can see the different layers of sandstone as well as the plaque.
If you go to the end of Saunders Street, you'll see the cliff faces where that's right. Walk in behind the buildings and you'll see where Saunders finished their quarrying of yellow block. You can see the rough stone above it we call overburden, and below it the beautiful yellow block, which that went below sea level.
Now, what was there before you started quarrying?
It was cliffs that went down to Blackwattle Bay.
See? This is astonishing. By the way, why do you call it harvesting and not quarrying?
Quarrying, probably that industrial connotation, sort of out in the fields where you can have dust and noise without any consequence of the area we're working in. Here we're working in a highly built-up area, so we're taking great care to get the stone out with minimum vibration, noise and dust. So,
by the way, what you've done at Barangaroo is amazing. I mean, to sit there and look back, which is what Paul Keating wanted, to sit there and look back. You can just sit there and write poetry.
Well, we can thank George Proudman and Troy Stratti for that, because George Proudman knew we needed more yellow block to conserve Sydney's buildings. He worked together with this young bloke called Troy Stratti. They were working over here near Glebe Island Bridge and Pyrmont Bridge, and they developed these big cutting wheels for getting the stone out.
But how did you know it was there?
Historically.
Yeah.
Because this is where all of the Sydney's buildings material came from, and George Proudman would trawl around looking at cuttings, looking at opportunities for getting this yellow block sandstone out. So
the 3 Pyrmont quarries were called Paradise, Purgatory and Hellhole.
That's right.
Where do those names come from?
Well, the Hellhole quarry was along opposite the Greyhound track.
Wentworth Park.
Wentworth Park. There was a deep hole there. It was 20 feet below the ground level, so that the masons working down in it, no breeze, hot sun, sweating, it was an absolute hellhole down there.
So am I right in saying that Sydney's pretty much built on sandstone, but it's mostly the common Sydney Basin Hawkesbury sandstone, whereas this project is yellow block sandstone?
Yes, yellow block is a very special type of Hawkesbury sandstone. Yep.
And geologically, how long has that been there?
200 million years ago, when we were part of Gondwana land. And what makes yellow block so special is that there's deposits of it up to 7 metres deep without any differentiation. I mean, people are aware of banded stone, which gives nice patterns, but when the stonemasons want to carve it, that gives them difficulty in carving and potential faults and planes of weakness. Yellow block is just this one single deposit. They call it a freestone. So the masons can carve it. They can cut it in any direction and make these beautiful coats of arms like we see on the GPO.
So the place that you're excavating up in Harris Street, just a few hundred metres from the radio station as the crow flies, and how did you know that the yellow block was there?
Back in 2000, I worked with Troy, and we got about 4,000 cubic metres of stone, about 20,000 tonnes, similar quantity, out of where the McCaffrey's Tower is now, and the terraces in Mount Street. And we have a DA clause that City Council...
Well, I'll tell you what, now listen, you just hang around here in your work shirt, because I've got a commitment to take with Harley, and we'll come back to you after the news. How's that?
Absolutely.
We haven't got Harley there. Oh, sorry. This happens often. We can put men on the moon, but often Harley is not able to get through to us or us to him, so he's not there. So we'll just keep talking here. So this is coming out in 10-ton blocks. There he is, 10-ton blocks.
10-ton blocks, yep. I did say 4-ton before, sorry, it's 4 cubic metres, 10-ton.
10-ton blocks. Okay, we'll come back and talk to you. This is an amazing story. He's the Sandstone consultant and architect, Ron Powell.
The US Report, thanks to Peters of Kensington. Open 7 days at Barangaroo, Birkenhead Point and Kensington. Or shop online at...
Powell, now I just said stay with us here for a moment. This is an extraordinary story because they're excavating up there in Harris Street, and it's just not far from here, this yellow block sandstone. And so, Ron, just summing up, you're saying this is coming out in 10-ton blocks. And if people go there, you can see these blocks sitting on the ground.
Troy Stratti has put one block there right at the footpath where people can see it, and he's cut it in half so that you can see the inside of the block as well as the rough outside edges. You can also see a hole about 50-60 mil diameter. That was put there because the geotechnical engineers, paid for by Public Works in this case, drilled right down the site to see what the nature of the stone was underneath the site. Now, City Council require all developers to do this to find if there's yellow block worth harvesting in these excavations for big buildings. But you need the right developer. TWT in this case is concerned about Sydney's heritage, and they've said, we'll give you time to harvest these blocks. We're not busting to start building out of the ground. Let's do it properly. Let's help conserve Sydney's heritage.
Magnificent. And look, I understand that you're starting to ship the stone. Well, firstly, the other point I wanted to make is it right that when it's initially harvested, it's grey, and then it rusts and turns into this beautiful gold colour? That's
right. It has an oxide of iron called siderite, and when it's at the right proportion, and in this case it's about 4%, when it's exposed to the atmosphere after 200 million years of being buried, not only does it form this beautiful colour, but it case hardens the outside and makes it a very durable stone. You know, there's other great sandstones coming from the Wonderbine area, but they don't colour. They're grey.
Amazing.
And unfortunately, St Mary's spires had to have artificial colouring put on this grey sandstone.
2 questions. Where are you going to ship it to? Where are you taking it to?
Yeah, Public Works has a storage yard on the Georges River at Sandy Point, and also where their stonemasons work at Alexandria. They use about 10 or 12 blocks at a time, so some are going to Alexandria. And then down at Sandy Point, I call it Sydney's Fort Knox.
Will they break those blocks up?
They don't break them. They have diamond saws, and they cut them. Break them down in smaller pieces.
And just you've said in the last couple of minutes, you've mentioned the word sandstone many times, stonemasons many times. Do we have stonemasons?
Back in the 1970s and 1980s, there was no work for stonemasons, so we thought. Public Works had 2 stonemasons left. We needed to find more. They engaged George Proudman, who'd been a master mason. He started an apprentice course at TAFE, and Public Works have trained more than 50 stonemasons since that time. Yes, Sydney's has now a secure workforce of well-trained stonemasons to conserve our buildings.
When I was at Oxford University, I was invited by a friend, I was telling Ron, to go down to Thomas Hardy country in Devon, to a place called Worth Matravers. I'd never been there, and it was just beautiful. And anyway, we had dinner, and they made me most welcome. I didn't know them. Gave me a bedroom, and it was all nicely done up. And I woke up early in the morning, and I could hear this. I thought, my God, where am I here? What's going on? And it just kept on going. I didn't like to say, what's that about? I thought there might be something wrong with the house or whatever. Anyway, curiosity overtook me, and I said, what's that? Oh, they said it's the stonemasons down there just breaking the stone. It's lovely stuff, isn't it?
Charles Saunders came from Devon. His wife was a quarry master. They came to Sydney at the very last day of 1851, the year that gold was discovered in Sydney. He was coming out to make his fortune in Sandstone, not like all the other gold diggers on the boat that he came out with.
Isn't this amazing? And here we are. This radio station, 2GB, is in Saunders Street, named after the Saunders family who owned and ran the quarries of Sydney for 3 generations in the 1800s. Keep at it. Brilliant stuff, Ron. Lovely to talk to you. There he is. He's everything. He's an architect and he's a stone man or stone consultant, Ron Powell. But there's a website, Stratti, strati.com.au, strati.com.au. Conrad, good morning.
Good morning. I'm a true blue crow eater, South Australian.
Yes.
I wondered if you might be interested. The Adelaide Hills has the only other Australian known source of accessible yellow block freestone. It's called freestone in Adelaide. They are the scars you see in the Adelaide Hills escarpment when you fly into Adelaide. Harvesting of it has now been stopped because of the terrible disfigurement of the environs, but it was a marvellous stone. In fact, we had our house built out of it back in the 40s. In those days, they didn't have the technology to harvest it by the slab or the large block. It was basically random pieces, but it was commonly used in the GPO and all the heritage buildings in the city of Adelaide, and that is the only other known source of it.
Ron's just listening to this.
That's right, Conrad. It is a very rare stone. We did have other pockets of it in Sydney, in Bondi and Waverley,
right.
But as we know, they are very much built-up areas, and the opportunity to now get yellow block these days is pretty much limited to excavations for building sites. And there's a building just up the road here in Harris Street that actually had a 10-storey deep car park below it, and we got about a similar quantity, about 1,000 cubic metres of the hellhole stone out of the excavations for that building site.
Nice.
That's the only way we can get it these days.
Thank you for ringing, Conrad. Thank you for ringing, and thank you, Ron, for sharing that history and scholarship with us. And just before we go to a break, Senator Dastyari has made a statement.